Alright everyone, it's time to talk about O.J. Simpson, and we may see this become like the #1 story of the year, O.J. Simpson paroled, because a lot of people, like certainly Generation Z doesn't know what O.J. Simpson pertains to. Even a lot of millennials, like the only other time, other than the murders many years ago, that a lot of people my age don't even really recall for the most part. Sort of a famous case, but at the same time there's a little bit of a lapse in memory retention, I think, among some people. The only other time that O.J. Simpson was really mentioned was sort of prior to the interconnected social media era. We're talking 2007 to 2008. I don't believe there was a Twitter at the time, if I remember correctly. I think that comes a couple years later. There's no, like, Gab or anything like that. YouTube was far less interconnected. Facebook was still relatively young. I don't even think they had rolled out Timeline at that point. I think they were still using the really old format till, like, what was it, 2010 or something. So the last time that O.J. Simpson could have been a viral story, that never happened because social media was still almost an afterthought. The web was still largely standalone content and sites that had mild interconnections between them. That's not the way it is anymore, so you can expect O.J. Simpson, if he's paroled, and he probably will be, I would predict he gets paroled. I think it's unlikely that they'll keep him in there. He's already been paroled on, I believe, 5 or 6 of the counts that came up. It was like armed robbery and burglary, coercion with a firearm, and he's gotten paroled already on every charge except for the firearms-related charges. Based on that precedent, and the precedent of he has indeed been a model prisoner, and done nothing wrong since then, especially considering his age. He was born in 1947. He's an old man now. I think it's very unlikely that they'll hold him longer, because I think what would happen is a lot of people would say, you're continuing to punish him under any other circumstances with no prior, like, record of, without the murder trial, you wouldn't be keeping him here. It would be a result that would only be giving sort of excessive punishment to try to levy it against him because you think that he's guilty of murder. It would turn into a racial issue, and I don't think that the people there really want to turn it into a racial issue. I think that they'll let him go. And that's probably the right thing to do. Look, the reason that he's in prison right now has nothing to do with the more famous murder case and the slow-speed chase and the glove don't fit, you must acquit, and all of this other Furman and all this stuff that went on long before that. This is about him supposedly breaking in to take back his possessions from people who had already stolen them. Now, they took stuff that didn't belong to O.J. Simpson during that period, and he brandished a gun. That's the main reason he got in trouble. In fact, if he hadn't brandished a gun, he would have been let out quite some time ago probably anyway. Probably would have been out in 2 or 3 years. And I said, who cares? Yeah, he broke in with some of his friends. Maybe he was drunk. Who knows? Who cares? They weren't even armed. He was armed. That was the problem. But since then, since that time, he has not established a pattern of criminal behavior. He hasn't established a pattern of being an unhinged individual. In fact, other than that case and the prior case involving murder, there really is nothing else to go on. That's not necessarily saying a great thing favorably in O.J. Simpson's favor, but he's not in prison for the murder that he, let's face it, did commit. He was found not guilty because all the evidence was totally fucking botched. And it was right to find him not guilty of that. No matter how obvious it is that a crime has been committed, if you can't put together reasonable evidence in a legal framework, you shouldn't be able to put somebody in prison. You simply shouldn't be able to. It's the way justice should be blind in that case. It can't take into consideration, well, we have a hunch. Well, we find it obvious that somebody did something wrong. No, bullshit. That's not the way it's supposed to work. If they keep him in prison longer, a lot of people are going to feel like they're just doing it because of that prior case that he was found not guilty on. It wouldn't be a good look for them. I think it would be a huge mistake for them to keep him longer. He's old now. It's almost like Bill Cosby when you think about it. Here you've got somebody who is now getting up towards ancient status, really not capable of doing any sort of commission of crime anymore. And we're talking about things that happened many years before that. So a lot of people will just say, oh, like in Bill Cosby's case, even if it's obvious some shenanigans were going on, they're never actually going to nail him to the wall on it. because it's been too long. He's old. He sits there in his tuxedo, and they say, "Oh, the poor old man. Just let him go." Yeah, he's allegedly raped 40, 50 women, but he's old, and that was in the past. And he's a celebrity. O.J. Simpson's a celeb too. Maybe not at Bill Cosby levels, but he is well known. They're going to look really bad if they keep him in prison. And we're not even talking about someone who's like a serial rapist sort of thing. We're talking about a botched robbery here, in which nobody was shot. He never threatened to shoot anyone. He just brandished a firearm. There are ameliorating circumstances there, and O.J. Simpson is fundamentally right when he talks about that. But I will say this. Here's another thing. It will dig up some very old racial animus if he's paroled, as I suspect he will be. There will be racial animus. You can look towards, there's going to be a shit ton of racial posting on Twitter. It's going to happen, you know it. All the Black Lives Matter people are going to be like, oh, yeah, praise OJ, yeah, they didn't decide to further his pain and suffering. I mean, if they do decide to keep him there, they'll make it out as, oh, they're being racist. They're doing it because he's black, even though the real reason would be because of a prior case. That's what they'll do. A lot of other people say, oh, well, he's a murderer. They should never let him out again. And this is because, you know, he's black, so he's getting deferential treatment and stuff. You're going to see a lot of that. Trust me. Yeah, all over Twitter, it's going to be a shit-flinging fest. It's going to be 24 hours of nonstop chaos, because this is the first time that it's going to get to go viral on full modern social media, as opposed to like the standalone net of 2007, 2008. Totally different world. Gen Z doesn't know how lucky it has it, honestly. Like, allow me to be born 10 years later. That would have been great. Yeah, it's going to be pretty weird to see, I think. And they're going to parole him. No, I don't think they're going to keep him in longer. If he's been a model prisoner, done everything he's supposed to be doing. Yeah, I got the therapy and, you know, I did counseling. I found Jesus, or something like that is the old adage. Somebody who's up for parole. I found Jesus. I'm really, really religious now. I'm really, really sorry. You should let me go so I can go be like a priest or something like that. You know, like OJ goes to the parole hearing. He says, I'm going to be a pastor now. I've decided to donate all of my proceeds and me donating to the to some Catholic kids charity, to the battered women's shelter, something like that. Yeah, I'll be raising money for battered women, and for victims of burglary, in the general region or something like that. I think they'll let him out. I think that, and it's the right thing to do. He's not in prison for murder. He's in prison for this robbery. He's eligible. He's already been paroled on a bunch of other charges. What's the point of keeping him in any longer? You're not going to get a different outcome. Like, I don't think at this point he's a little bit old to go around, like, doing the mass murder and robbery thing anyway. He might flip out, but the thing is, I think at this point, he's at that point in life where if he flips out again and gets put into prison for more than, like, 6 months, he'll probably die in prison. He gets any sort of violent misdemeanor/felony charge, and he's in for life because he'll almost certainly die behind bars. I would think at this point the juice would want to be free for the rest of his life. Now, but trying to hold an old case that he was found not guilty on over his head, a lot of people want to do that sort of thing. They want to say, well, it was obvious he murdered, therefore on this different charge they should hold him forever. I totally disagree. It doesn't matter if he got off with murder, which I would agree with, because that's not why he's in prison. You can't take that into consideration. He was found not guilty. We have to have rule of law in the country. A lot of the people that keep saying that, they'll be the ones saying that they wish that the murder case was going to be held over his head. I think it's at a terrible, terrible precedent if we allowed the legal system to do that. But are you really going to get these the parole board to say, no, we don't recommend parole? And even if they don't, if they were to say, well, we're not letting him out, how do we know that the governor's not just going to give him a pardon and say, okay, well, I disagree with them. I think if he's been in model prison, I don't like this. Maybe he'll grandstand. Maybe the governor there will just say, oh, well, maybe there's some racial motive here. Well, I don't agree with this bullshit. And then he just pardons him. Then that'd be front page news for a week or something. But I think he'll get out of prison. I think he'll walk. You know, he's going to be on parole. He'll still have to have, like, a parole officer and everything. It's not like he leaves the jail, wanders off into the wild blue yonder with no further responsibility. For probably the rest of his life, he's still going to be meeting with, like, a parole officer and stuff. Which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm sure he'd prefer it to having to be in a prison. He's not even in a high security facility, by the way. He's in a medium security prison. He's not exactly in Maxie, if you know what I'm saying. He's not exactly there with Jack the Ripper and everybody else, which means that even the state there doesn't perceive him as being quite so high a possible risk of reoffending, being like going totally apeshit, killing a bunch of people, because he never did. And he's built like he could. You know, he's a former football player. It's self-explanatory. Yeah, he could probably rip somebody's neck off from their shoulders, or twist their head around backwards, or kick somebody in the back hard enough to break their spine. He could probably do that, but he hasn't. So I guess, I mean, if in a high-stress environment like a prison, he's not flipping out in a bout of anger or depression or anything. If he's on the outside under less stress, probably, yeah, he'd probably do fine. And he probably, he'll probably try to capitalize upon the infamy associated with his name. He'll write another book or two, maybe sell the movie rights of his life story to someone. And I believe that the other individuals in civil cases, he was found liable, so they end up basically taking all of his money. So basically for the rest of his life, he's a slave to other people to make them money that he has to give him for restitution purposes. I think that's a little bit weird, how we do that as a society. Sometimes it appears to be taken a little bit to excess. But, yeah, he'll probably be paroled. And it's the best thing for the situation. Keeping him in there would be far worse, I think, as a PR campaign. That's about all. Peace out.